Hello everyone, welcome to Cinema Safari Episode 3. Today we will be talking about The Fantastic Four First Steps. Now, The Fantastic Four First Steps exceeded all expectations in its opening weekend this past week. It debuted with its Thursday previews, the highest of 2025 so far, making a little over 24 million. It dethroned Superman domestically and globally. Now, globally, it made a little over 217 million, which is about 60 million more than the 2015 Fantastic Four made in its entire theatrical run, which is a big, significant number. But it surpassed all expectations. Great to see for that. Very exciting there. Now, The Fantastic Four First Steps is the 37th film overall in the MCU, first film of Phase 6, and it will be leading into Avengers Doomsday and then Secret Wars. Now, this Fantastic Four is, technically it is the second reboot of the film series. There was a 1994 unreleased Fantastic Four film that not a lot of people know about. So technically that is the first live-action film of the Marvel's first family that was made. It just wasn't released. Pretty sure it did get, filming on that did complete. So they have the whole movie, they just never released it. So Tim Story's two films from the early 2000s are considered the first, live-action, or first, theatrical iteration of the Fantastic Four. Then, of course, we have the 2015 Josh Trank Fantastic Four, which underperformed a lot. It went through a lot of story changes, script changes, a lot of head-to-head between Josh Trank and Fox at the time of how they wanted the film to go, and it just didn't end up being what anyone really hoped it would be. Then we get the First Steps, which is doing amazing, both critically, fans are loving it, it's been doing great at box office, so it's great to see after a few attempts that haven't really played out to finally they're getting their moment on the big screen, which is great to see. So the Fantastic Four 1994 version, the unreleased one, we had Alex Hyde White as Reed Richards, Rebecca Staub as Sue Storm, Jay Underwood as Johnny Storm, and then Carl Ciarfalio as Ben. And the four of them actually made a cameo appearance in this new film, which was cool to see, because not a lot of people know that they made a Fantastic Four film about 30 years ago at this point. So if you don't know them, you wouldn't have known they were in the film, but it was, for people who actually know them, it was cool to see them there after what they did 30 years ago. Then we have Tim Story's two films, Fantastic Four and then Rise of the Silver Surfer, with Ian Grufford as Reed, Jessica Alba as Sue, Chris Evans with his first foray into superhero movies as Johnny Storm, and then Michael Chiklis as The Thing. 2015, Miles Teller takes over the head role of Reed, Kate Mara as Sue, Michael B. Jordan as Johnny, and then Jamie Bell as The Thing. And Jamie Bell, Kate Mara, of course, go on to get married in real life, which was pretty cool after they started together in the film. The First Steps, Pedro Pascal, who is basically the love of everyone's life right now in the world. He is Reed Richards, then we have Vanessa Kirby as Sue, Joseph Quinn as Johnny, and Eben Mosbach as Ben Grimm, The Thing. And I thought that the four of them had really good chemistry for the film, their portrayals, and just scenes together with them. I thought definitely a big highlight of the film. Now, the portrayals and the versions of them that we saw were definitely a lot closer to the Tim Story films from the early 2000s, with, of course, the 2015 film being a lot darker in tone. which I know it went through a lot of like story rewrites and like a lot of changes. So what we saw theatrically for that film wasn't really the version that director Josh Trank wanted audiences to see. But there was a lot of butting heads, I think, with him and the studio at the time. So it was a lot darker in a sense. Tim Story's films, a lot more lighthearted. Definitely had like their serious moments as well as First Steps. But I think they were more like comic accurate with the characters based on how we know them, especially from past iterations. Especially Joseph Quinn, I thought he had really good development in the film because we know Johnny Storm as being like, playful, a goofball, jokes around a lot, doesn't really take things seriously as much as the other members of the group. But, when it comes down to business, he flames on, does his stuff, very powerful, and is very supportive of the group. Now, Joseph Quinn, he definitely had those moments, definitely one of the comedic reliefs of the film, but he definitely had a more serious side to him than we've necessarily seen in past iterations. We did see him working on something in the film that connected to the Silver Surfer and Galactus, and trying to figure out how, especially the Silver Surfer, who she is, how she came to be, and what her deal is to kind of help the rest of his team stop them. And I thought that was really cool because we haven't really seen Johnny Storm use his mind in the way that Joseph Quinn portrayed him to, and I thought it was really nice. Now, the Thing, in this film, he is basically loved by everyone on Earth. Because I know in past iterations, some people, especially before they really knew who he was, they were kind of scared of him. And in the First Steps, it's not really an origin story because we are about, I believe, 3 years into them being the Fantastic Four, having their powers. But the Thing in this film, he is kind of more accepting at this point of having the powers, of being the Thing, rather than what we saw like with Michael Chiklis, Jamie Bell, who were kind of fighting it, trying to not be in that state. And it has been 3 years in the story, so maybe the Thing in this new film, he's a little more accepting of what has happened. And then, of course, we have the first live action debut of Franklin Richards, who, of course, is Reed Richards and Sue Storm's son in the comics. He is probably one of the most powerful beings in the Marvel Universe, and that definitely plays a huge part in this film as well. Now, that is a big part of the plot. Galactus and the Silver Surfer, once they find out about Franklin, and spoilers, Galactus does try to take Franklin to be his basically successor as the planet devourer, so Galactus can basically retire and stop doing, because he's been Galactus, the destroyer of worlds, for a long, long time, and he's ready to move on. Galactus in this film, of course, we did see him in The Rise of the Silver Surfer, and in that version, he wasn't really a character. He was more of like a smoke of like asteroids and like, I don't even know. But this film, we actually got a character. He was terrifying to see on screen. Like his design was really, really cool. I thought he probably had one of the better, if not one of the best designs of any character in the Marvel Universe, at least in film. I think he was still kind of either underdeveloped or maybe a little underused. But it definitely was a huge improvement from what we got about 20 years ago. So I was happy with that. And I thought that the actor did a great job with him. Now, I think a lot of people, when First Steps was first announced and when it was leading up to the release, that it was going to be kind of just basically a setup film into Avengers Doomsday. And the film itself, honestly, it was basically its own story. Like, it really had no and of course it is set on a different Earth, different time period. But it's still, like, it didn't really have any connections to the rest of the MCU, which was a refreshing feeling, I think. Especially when you're 37 movies in, trying to connect all these films together to make a bigger universe. Which I think, especially in more recent films, has kind of hurt the MCU. But this film is its own thing, its own self-contained story, which was great to see. I think that definitely helped the film in a positive way. And we didn't really get any connections or like lead-ins to any other MCU films or the upcoming Avengers films besides the mid-credit scene, which I'm not going to say what happened, but a lot of people, I think, know, or at least kind of knew what probably was going to happen and who was going to be in that scene. But that was pretty much the only part that was basically a setup into the Avengers. Now, going forward, after Fantastic Four, we will see them again in Avengers Doomsday and then Secret Wars, and there is a sequel to First Steps that is being talked about, and I think I don't know if it's an active development right now, but they are definitely talking about having a sequel to it, especially since it did have such a strong opening weekend. And we are expected, Kevin Feige said, to see these characters post Secret Wars. So I think that they have a bright future going forward, and I'm excited to see where they go in the future as well. So Kevin Feige did say that this version of the characters is not the same version as that we will see in Doomsday and Secret Wars. So the ship that we saw in the post-credit scene of Thunderbolts, which they got the signal from space, and then they saw a ship with the Fantastic Four symbol on it. Kevin Feige said that is not the same team as the one in First Steps. So I think the big question on everyone's mind is how that team, if it's true that it's a different team, how they might differ from this version that we were introduced to, and how they will be portrayed in Avengers. And I know that Pedro Pascal is, his Reed Richards is supposedly going to be the face of the Avengers in those two films, and maybe moving forward in the MCU after Secret Wars. And it'll definitely be interesting to see how especially how they interact with the other heroes. And because on the Earth that we were introduced to in First Steps, they're known worldwide, but they are the only heroes on their world, or in their world, and they haven't interacted with other heroes before. So it'll be interesting to see how that development occurs leading into Doomsday. How their experience with this event with Galactus and the Silver Surfer leads into their moving forward within the whole scope of the rest of the MCU. Now, a big theme in the First Steps was motherhood. So, of course, Sue with Franklin, we saw how much she cares about Franklin, what she's willing to do to keep him safe, but also keep the world safe, which was very powerful. She had one scene where she gave a speech to the citizens of New York or wherever they are, about not sacrificing Franklin, but not sacrificing Earth either. And that was a very powerful moment, I thought. Now, the other part of motherhood theme that we see in the film is the Silver Surfer. We saw how she sacrificed herself to become the Silver Surfer to protect her daughter, and so Galactus would spare her planet. And so that theme of motherhood from both aspects, both sides of things, we see how they sacrifice to protect the ones they love, which is, I think, the overall message for the film, which is a very powerful message, and I thought really helped strengthen the film. And to me, it was probably one of the best parts of the film, and why it is so successful compared to other iterations of the Fantastic Four. Now, I know Julia Garner, I thought she did an amazing job as this version of the Silver Surfer. Now, before the film came out, she was getting a lot of hate. A lot of people were saying that Marvel gender swapped Silver Surfer. They didn't. This version of the Silver Surfer is from the comics. Not as well known as the Silver Surfer that was from The Rise of the Silver Surfer. But this version, she was in the comics for a short run, but she definitely was there for a few. So they didn't just create another version of the Silver Surfer for this film. They didn't gender swap the Silver Surfer. So, but she did a great job, and her version worked really well for the film. If they had like the more well-known Silver Surfer, it might have still worked, but it, based on how the overall film ended up being, it wouldn't have really made sense. Especially with Johnny kind of have his relationship with the Silver Surfer throughout the film and how that developed. That was a big part of the film, big part of the development for both of the characters, I think. Him trying to kind of understand her, trying to help her, not necessarily become good in a sense. Well, I guess kind of, because at the end she does kind of sacrifice herself to save them. But yeah, his development just to try to help her, which was a big part of the film. And also that this film is set on a different Earth, different time period, so it is basically a standalone film, so that does give them the potential to bring in the more well-known Silver Surfer in a future film in the main MCU, which is where we will see the Fantastic Four moving forward. I don't think, even if there's a sequel to First Steps, I think it would be set like in the main MCU. I don't think it would be set on this like separate Earth again. So there's definitely that potential to bring in the more well-known characters in the main universe, but this version definitely worked for this film and was a strong point for the film. Now, going forward, we have Doomsday, Secret Wars. Reed Richards is set to be the head Avenger, supposedly, and it's going to be very interesting to see how these characters develop moving into the main universe with all the heroes, all the villains, especially having Doctor Doom, who they may or may not know. Because in this film, we did get a tease of Latveria earlier on in the film. Then that was basically it. So I don't know, because we didn't really see their origins. So we saw some flashbacks throughout the film, so I don't know if they even know Doctor Doom or Victor Von Doom, if he is Victor Von Doom, if that's the version of that Robert Downey Jr. is playing of the character, which we still don't really know anything about him. So, because in every past iteration, Doctor Doom, Victor Von Doom, he is with the Fantastic Four, when they are in space or however they get their powers. He was absent from the flashbacks we saw in the First Steps, so there's a chance they don't even know him, which will be interesting as well. So I'm very excited to see, moving forward, where this version of how the characters develop moving forward into the larger scope of the MCU, how they do connect with Doctor Doom in Doomsday and then potentially Secret Wars. I'm assuming Doctor Doom's also in Secret Wars. And then just moving forward in the future with the MCU. I know Kevin Feige did say that after Secret Wars, they're doing kind of a reboot for the MCU, but he did iterate that the Fantastic Four will still be a big part in the future of the MCU going forward. So after the reboot, it'll be interesting to see what that entitles for these characters, and then what kind of stories we'll see from them moving forward in this rebooted universe, so to speak. Now, we were talking about, I think in the Superman episode, Hollywood's relying heavily on like remakes, sequels, reboots even, especially in even the last like decade, maybe even more than like original films, because the original films that we get haven't been doing as well in recent years, and having this being the second reboot of the Fantastic Four after some not so successful attempts at the team, it's doing very successful, and I think there's a lot of components to why those films might not have done great, why this film might be doing better. There's a lot of reason to go into it. I think that could be like a whole another conversation on its own, but you have such a great cast, and I think 4 actors that are at like the top of their game right now. Very sought after actors, like Pedro Pascal, probably the biggest actor on the planet right now, or at least the most sought after actor on the planet right now. Joseph Quinn, earlier in his career right now, but he's been in a lot of very successful films these past few years, and I'm excited to see where he goes from here. I think he has a really good career ahead of him. And of course, Vanessa Kirby, Evan Moss-Bachrach, they've been doing great too. But we have had good casts for like the other films, so I don't think it's just that. I think also the fact that Tim Story, when his films came out in the early 2000s, especially the first film, it came out like after the success of Sam Raimi's first 2 Spider-Man films, and then like the first 1 or 2 X-Men films. So, but even then, superhero films weren't as big at that time, so I think that also played into it. Because the superhero films didn't really like kick into high gear, I would say, till Iron Man in 2008. Of course, you had like The Dark Knight also in 2008. So I think those 2 films really kickstarted the superhero phase in Hollywood. Of course, we had 2015's Fantastic Four, which was in like the middle of the superhero craze phase, I guess. So I think that failed for completely different reasons. Just for, I know that film had a lot of like stuff going on behind the scenes that changed the film that we might have seen. Yeah, but Tim Story's 2 films definitely were before like the big major superhero craze, so I think that the Fantastic Four weren't. Because even Spider-Man, like the earlier X-Men, like Spider-Man, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, all 3 did great at the box office, but especially the first one, which came out in 2002, it was right after, like, I think the first X-Men, maybe a year or 2 after. And I'm not sure if the second X-Men came out at that time, but just based off like who Spider-Man is, I think he was more well-known character than maybe the Fantastic Four were. They weren't necessarily as popular, so that definitely added to it as well. The first steps, I think, because we are in a place where super films are more, I guess, accepted now, and also the fact that it's the 37th film in a major franchise, and what it's expected to like kind of set up going forward. That's part of the reason I think why it's getting so much praise, but it's also like just I think a well-made film. And going back to Superman, a lot of people I think were comparing the two films because they were released so close together. And I thought that this film, and a lot of people I talked to preferred Fantastic Four over Superman for whatever reasons they had. But for me personally, I thought that Fantastic Four was an amazing film. I will definitely see it multiple times in theaters. But for me personally, I think just on a personal level, I am more of a Superman fan. So if I was comparing the two, I would probably, even if I gave them like a similar rating, I would still say I prefer Superman if I had to pick one, just because I'm more of a Superman fan. Not that I have anything against the Fantastic Four, so to say, but just that I don't personally know them as, like, I kept up like more with the Superman comics growing up, so I just have more of a connection, I guess, to Superman than the Fantastic Four. But I thought it was a well-made movie, great story, great performances, so it was a well-made film. And just the fact that it's part of a huge franchise and the Marvel Universe, I think more people are going to see it because it does have connections to a wider universe than the past iterations have had. So I'm excited to see where the Fantastic Four go into the future and how they continue to impact the MCU going forward, and to see these characters and actors develop in these roles within the two Avengers films, and then beyond that, with the potential reboot of the MCU after Secret Wars. Now we have we have Doomsday stated for release in December 2026, where we will finally get to see Robert Downey Jr. as Doctor Doom, whatever version of the character he is playing of that character, because there are different versions in the comics. So they're excited to see him as Doctor Doom. And then, of course, we have Secret Wars, which is the following year, 2027. And then after that, we will be wrapping up Phase 6 and the Multiverse Saga, and then rebooting the MCU, going back to one singular timeline, no more multiverse, which I think will help the MCU going forward. I think the multiverse saga, a big thing I think of why it wasn't as successful as the Infinity Saga. Well, a lot of the characters from the Infinity Saga retired after Endgame, so especially some of the like big players like Chris Evans, Robert Downey Jr. So we lose them, but we also a lot of the characters we've been introduced to in the Multiverse Saga are lesser known characters that people might not know as much about, or maybe not care as much about. Whatever the case is, though, having all these stories in the multiverse definitely affected the Multiverse Saga, and I think going back to a singular timeline moving forward after Secret Wars, I think will help the MCU going forward, because there's so many comic books out there, both in Marvel and DC, so there's so many potentials for great stories to bring to the big screen, and they definitely have the groundwork to do it right, so I'm excited to see. Kevin Feige's contract does expire in 2 years, basically around the time Secret Wars comes out, so it'll be interesting to see if he renews, and then Most likely he will, because he is already talking about the reboot of MCU and like his plans kind of beyond Secret Wars. Although we don't really know like specifics on any projects beyond then, but he probably will be sticking around for at least a while. So I'm excited to see where we go after Secret Wars, and then with Doomsday and Secret Wars, and then beyond. So I think there's a bright future for the MCU, and I am very excited to see it going forward. Now, rating the Fantastic Four First Steps. Out of 4 stars, I will give it a 3.5. Same as Superman that I reviewed a couple weeks ago. And I like both of them very much. If it's, like I said, if I had to compare them, I would still choose Superman over Fantastic Four just because I'm personally more of a Superman fan. But Fantastic Four I thought was very well made, a great film. Probably one of the best films we've had in the multiverse saga at any point. And in the entire MCU, I feel like it might have been one of the strongest films. Because it definitely had a lot like a family feel, a lot of heart to it, and it was a great story. One of, I think, the better villains in the MCU, although Galactus, like I said, was, I thought, maybe a little underdeveloped in the film. He was still, the way he was portrayed and then physically how he looked there, I thought was one of the best. So 3.5 out of 4 is what I'm going to rank it. And I'd be happy to know, curious to know what you all think. So leave your rating in the comments. Respond to me on social media, Instagram at Cinema Safari Podcast, Twitter at Cinema Safari 25, and yeah, just leave your review of the film, any future films you want me to talk about. Might have some different co-hosts and guests moving forward in some future episodes. And if you enjoyed this episode, please like the episode, comment with your thoughts on the film, the MCU, and then subscribe to the channel. And also, you can listen to the episodes as well on Spotify, and it's still under Cinema Safari on Spotify, so very easy to find. And thank you for watching. We will see you all next time.